First of all, thank you for agreeing to come to my Avocado Insider series for YouTube. Let me give you a brief introduction about me and my project. My name is Harshad Godha, and I am pioneering commercial avocado production in India. Now, I studied in the UK, and there I used to eat avocados a lot. And one day saw on the packaging that it says it was sourced from Israel. So I figured that if Israel can grow avocados in such hot climatic conditions, maybe avocados can grow in India too. So that's how it all began. Then I visited Israel. I spent a month there in a kibbutz called Kibbutz Magan, and I lived with a grower for a month. I learned about, well, I didn't learn, but like I saw how to plant avocado trees. I met with industry experts. I met nursery owners and packhouse managers. So that's how my story began. And now I'm importing avocado plants from Israel to India for my own orchards and to sell it to other people as well. So I'm doing this interview to educate other farmers on what are the best practices of avocado from A to Z, everything. So can you tell my viewers a bit more about yourself, your background, what's your history with agriculture, Israel?
Okay, so my name is Dr. Roberto Nathan. I worked for 40 years in the extension. I was an extension officer in the extension service of the Ministry of Agriculture in Israel.
Mm,
I retired 5 days ago,
yeah.
and I counseled several governments and growers around the globe, everywhere. Uh, my specialist, my area of specialization is soil, water, and plant nutrition.
Mm,
I've done a lot of work in avocado.
okay.
Even currently, I'm working
Mm.
in avocado orchards, in avocado nurseries,
So in Israel
and
or abroad? In
in
Israel or
Israel and abroad,
okay.
especially in Latin America, countries like Mexico, Peru, Chile, Colombia,
Oh,
Spain, etc.
uh-huh.
And I visited India a number of times
Right.
in the
Can,
past.
can you tell me more about your history with India?
Well, my history, my let's call it a romance with India, started before I was born. My mother is a survivant of the Second World War,
Okay.
and she escaped from the war. I will not get into the details to India.
Okay.
She was sick, and she was a fugitive, and she was actually saved by the people of India in that time in Bombay.
Okay.
That was the name of the city at the
Mm,
time.
mm.
And we're talking about the 40s. And she became the first secretary of the British Embassy. And she had the opportunity of working with Mahatma Gandhi.
Oh,
She, I have pictures of
yeah.
her
Yeah.
shaking hands with Mahatma Gandhi and walking with him. She was, of course, how not, a great admirer of this very particular person.
Mm.
And she's an admirer of the Indian people. She told
That's
me I grew up hearing stories about the people of India, about Indian places.
mm.
And in the 80s, I was sent to India to work. My first project in India was in the area of Kutch.
Okay, in
In
Gujarat.
yes, no,
Okay.
in Kutch,
Okay.
in the
It's
north.
Kutch. Kutch is in
Kutch.
Gujarat. Yeah, it's in Gujarat. It's a coastal city, isn't it?
It's no, it's near the border with Pakistan.
Okay, I get it. Yeah.
That's what I remember. I'm
Yeah.
talking
Yeah.
about
Yes.
1986. That
Okay.
was my
Okay.
first visit to the area. for soil reclamation.
Okay.
Then the second time I came to India was to conduct a soil survey for the main tobacco company in India. Don't remember the name. That was a year later, maybe 87, maybe
Okay.
88, but not later than that, for a tobacco company to advise them, to counsel in many farms. I spent more than a month with them. We even flew from Bombay to many places with them to see several farms, mango and other crops, and to counsel them, etc., etc. I went back. I spent in India altogether several months, but in different visits
Okay.
in the late 80s and the early 90s. And
Right.
since then,
Yeah.
unfortunately,
Yeah.
I didn't go back. Not because I don't want to,
Yeah.
but because it just didn't happen. But
Right.
I can tell you, since I teach here in the International Center of International Assistance, I had a lot of Indian students of mine, many over the years. I'm talking hundreds.
Okay.
So I have a close relationship with India,
Yeah, I
if you
can
can call
get
it
that. Also,
like
when you
this.
mentioned that your mother worked with Mahatma Gandhi, that's an amazing story. That's
That's an
really,
incredible story. Nobody
yeah,
believes that.
yeah,
And I show the pictures,
yeah,
and you see my mother with
yeah.
Mr. Gandhi.
If you can share those
And
pictures with me, that would be amazing.
I will. She wrote a book,
Okay?
and if I'm not mistaken,
Yeah.
the pictures are there. At least one picture was published. It's in the book.
Okay.
If I'm not mistaken, I didn't look at the book for a long time,
Mm.
but if I'm not mistaken, there is at least one picture of my mother with Gandhi
Mm.
in the book. So I
Okay.
can scan it and send it to you. No
Yeah,
problem.
that would be perfect.
I
Right.
will find the pictures for sure.
Great. So, can you tell me a bit more about your work on avocados with in Latin America or like
Oh, in Latin America, my work with avocado, I started working in avocado with Professor Benyacov. Professor Benyacov, it's a very well-known avocado researcher.
yes, I've heard
He's the
about him.
father of the rootstocks that
Mm-hmm.
Hazera markets today.
Okay.
I work close to him with him. One of the varieties that was developed by Benyakov, it's called Tsiffrin 99.
Mm-hmm.
This variety, I remember the original tree. I was together with Benyakov when
Yeah.
we propagated it in a farm that belongs to the Ministry of Agriculture. I remember Mr. Benyakov, Professor Benyakov, sorry,
Yeah.
very well. And he worked a lot in Mexico. He brought a lot of genetic material from there because, as we all know, this is the origin of avocado.
Mm.
And all his work, I work with him until now. I work with his successors. Professor Benyakov passed away about 10 years ago, I think.
Okay.
Uh, I work together with his brother, who is also a scientist, but in
Mm-hmm.
flowers.
Yeah.
And I know the family very well.
Right.
That's the way how I started working in avocado. I also counsel many avocado farms in Israel and in Latin America, mostly in Mexico and in Peru,
Okay.
where I have a lot of former students that today run avocado farms,
Right.
some of them huge farms. And I'm talking about 4,000 hectares, 3,000 hectares, and
That's
so on.
so much.
Yes, yes.
Uh,
I visited those farms a couple of months ago,
okay.
and I'm traveling to Peru this Friday, coming Friday, and
Okay.
I will be visiting some of my former students.
Sounds like a great vacation.
It's work with vacation. For me, it's
Uh,
pleasure because I see people that I know and they were my students. They still call me professor,
okay.
and I'm not a professor, but in Spanish, professor means teacher.
Yeah.
And they call me professor, and
Mm,
okay.
right. So I should call you professor as well.
No, no, no.
Huh?
You can call me Roberto, is good enough.
Okay. Right. So, uh, can you tell me more about the climatic requirements that are most suitable for avocado farming?
The main, from the climate standpoint, avocado does not tolerate cold weather.
Okay.
So it should be planted in places where temperatures do not drop below, I would say, 5, 6 degrees, although can happen that
Yeah.
it goes even a little below. There are some rootstocks that can tolerate that, but I wouldn't do. So
Okay.
we're talking about, but let's say template temperatures, not too cold and
Yeah.
not too warm.
Okay.
Okay. On the other extreme,
Yeah.
if it becomes very hot and
Yes.
especially very dry,
Yeah.
so the tree will suffer.
Okay.
We're talking about template weather conditions,
Right.
not too cold, not too hot.
So the place where I'm growing avocado, the orchard that I'm planning to grow, the temperature can go a bit around 4 or 5 degrees, but like last week we had a bit of an extreme temperature and it got up to 2 degrees at night.
It's not so bad
Okay,
if these are occasional events
okay,
and it's not the average.
yeah, yeah.
It
It's not the
happens
average.
also
It's yeah,
extreme conditions that happens once in a long time, so
okay,
it's not wouldn't be a problem
yeah,
as long as we're talking 2 degrees Celsius plus, not
okay,
minus.
okay. And even during summers, my climatic conditions are a bit extreme, so it can go up to 42, 43. So we are not focused on Haas. Like we know we cannot grow Haas and lamb Haas. So
It's
my main focus is on Pinkerton and Ettinger.
Pinkerton.
Yes,
Okay.
and Ettinger because I've seen those work in Israel at 40 degrees in Kibbutz Magan. So I thought maybe it can tolerate that much in Bhopal as well.
Well, it depends on humidity.
Right.
40, 42 degrees
Yeah.
is very high for avocado.
Yes.
But if it comes on a hot spell
Yeah.
with very low temperatures during the spring,
Yeah.
it will result in the fruit abort. The fruit will abort.
Right.
Uh, so depends on the season when it happens.
Okay.
There
So
are some seasons,
yes.
periods in which the plant is very sensitive to extreme conditions.
Okay.
We're talking especially during fruit set.
Right. Right.
During fruit set, the fruit that it's just set is very sensitive to extreme conditions.
Okay.
So you can change the microclimate by using physical techniques, but it depends on humidity.
Right. Okay.
And we have to go deeper
Yeah.
and learn the climate for
Okay.
a special area
Yeah.
if you want to plant avocado before
Hmm.
making the decision.
Right. So, regarding that fruit set, we don't have that extreme temperatures during fruit set. It's after the fruit has already been there on the tree for a while. So I think fruit set begins in India in during this time in February, and
Okay,
then the extreme temperatures that I'm talking about will occur in May.
so that's better.
Yeah. Okay. Right.
That's better,
Yeah.
but still we need to study
Okay.
exact very carefully the climate
Yeah.
is because if it becomes very extreme, even after the sensitive period,
Yeah.
it could cause damage.
Right.
You can it can result in some fruit abscission, etc.
Right. Uh, what kind of soil is the most suitable for avocado?
Well, avocado can grow on many kinds of soils. You have to adjust the rootstock to the soil.
Right.
Avocado can grow on light soils, on clay soils,
Mm-hmm.
as long as they are well aerated
Mm-hmm.
with aeration, because avocado roots have a high oxygen requirement.
Okay.
So aeration is very important. So it
Mm-hmm.
can be a clay soil,
Yeah.
but as long as you have good aeration and water moves freely
Okay.
in the through the soil layers.
Yeah.
It
Okay.
can grow, but it can grow on many kinds of soils. Of
Right.
course, 100% sandy soil,
Yeah.
you have to add maybe compost or something, some organic matter
Mm-hmm.
to improve the soil fertility.
Yep.
But beside that, it's no problem.
Okay. Now, what's the difference between West Indian, Guatemalan, and Mexican races of avocado?
There are, as you know, there are three races of
Yep.
avocado. The main difference, there are many differences, but Guatemalan is a sort of in between, Mexican on one extreme,
Yep.
West Indian on the other extreme. West Indian varieties characterized in they're much more tolerant to salinity,
Right.
to lime conditions.
Mm-hmm.
They are more stable in terms of yield,
Okay.
higher, they yield higher.
Right.
Mexican are the opposite, more sensitive to salt and lime. Of course, every specific rootstock, we have a table and
Yeah.
we have all the requirements.
Yep.
But since Mexican race comes from hills, it's more tolerant to cold conditions.
Okay.
It can tolerate lower temperatures than all
Yeah.
the other races. That's,
Mm-hmm.
of course, very general.
Right. Now, what? So I've touched upon this point before regarding heat, but what avocado variety is the most suitable for hot climatic conditions?
You're talking about rootstock varieties
No,
or varieties?
well, both rootstock and commercial varieties on top, the science.
Depends on what you call. You're talking about arid conditions.
Yes.
Well, arid conditions, as long as the climate meets avocado requirements, if you want to call it, there's not a problem. If
Okay.
you have water,
Yep.
you can supply with everything. Even I would consider it an advantage
Okay.
because too much rainfall,
Yeah.
if the soil is not it's not well drained, it could become a problem.
Yep.
In arid soils, mostly the problems are lime, high pH, alkaline soils,
Yep.
and salinity. So
Right.
it will depend on the water source. If you have
Okay.
a good water source, good water quality source.
Yep.
You can irrigate with the drip irrigation or micro sprinkler or
Yep.
whatever, and the orchard will perform perfectly.
Okay.
So the limitation is if you have water available
Yep.
and good quality, relatively good quality, you can
Yep.
adjust the rootstock
Yep.
to the water quality.
Okay.
And in terms of that, talking about that, of course, if you have a problem with water quality, it would be better to use the West Indian race,
Yep.
which is more tolerant to water quality and to line condition and salinity, etc.
Right. And
With
what?
regards to
Yeah.
varieties, that depends on the climate. Even when you talk about Hass today, we have different Hass clones,
Yes.
and we have some of them. I'm not talking about the original Hass
Yeah. Yeah.
that comes from California. I'm talking about variations that we developed here in Israel in the Volcanic Research Station
Yeah.
that are more tolerant to those conditions. And you can market fruit, and commercially, it's not
Yeah.
Hass. It
Yeah.
has a different name,
Yeah.
but today they call it Hass.
Yeah.
Although the people that develop these varieties,
Yeah.
they say, but this is not Hass.
Yeah.
But it becomes dark like
Yeah.
Hass. So
I've
people call it Hass. It's
I've
not
read
Hass.
about I've read about two from Israel. One of them is Irit, and another one is Has Lavi.
Lavi.
Yeah.
The Lavi is one of the most popular.
Okay.
It's Hass-like.
Yeah.
It's not really Hass.
Hmm.
There are some new developments. There are different
Okay.
lines that we're testing these days.
Hmm.
Lavi became very popular, and now we are selling them in Latin America. Lavi,
Okay. Yeah.
they sell but in the market they are sold like Hass.
Oh. Hmm.
But Lavi is not Hass.
Yeah.
You're true. It's
Yeah.
Lavi.
And have you experimented with the other varieties from South Africa and USA like Gem and Maluma?
Gem and Maluma are also in Israel.
Yeah.
They are sort of Hass.
Mm-hmm.
Maluma has completely failed here.
Okay.
And also in Latin America. In my visits, I've seen in these farms that I mentioned earlier
Yeah.
that it's not doing well,
Okay.
and they going back to Hass. With regards to Gem, well, still not much work with. We need more work. We
Okay.
don't know exactly how, because as everything with fruit trees, it takes a lot of time to decide whether a new variety coming in, it's good enough. You have to
Yeah.
test it for years. It's a couple of years, it's not enough. You need adult orchards and many productions to assess a new variety and decide whether it can become commercial and compete with the
Yeah.
old ones, Haas, Ettinger, Pinkerton, and all the others.
Right. Uh, why should someone grow avocados on commercial rootstocks of avocados and not just on random seeds? Like I've seen it in nurseries in India. People are growing it on random seeds and grafting a commercial variety on top. Like, what does a commercial rootstock makes a difference for a commercial orchard owner?
The importance of the rootstock is very critical because if theoretically
Yeah.
you could graft Haas on Haas
Yeah.
or on anything.
Yes.
Technically, you can do that.
Yes.
But why we don't do that and we do not recommend? Because every rootstock confers to the variety certain properties, certain characteristics that are very important in terms of soil problems that
Yep.
may occur. For example, I mentioned earlier, salinity problems, lime problems, but we're talking also about tolerance to diseases. There are some rootstock varieties that are tolerant to, for example, Phytophthora or Verticillium or Botryosphera and other fungi that can become a problem. These characteristics, the variety on top does not have. So it's even dangerous to do that. It's not that I wouldn't recommend.
Yes.
It's not forbidden, but
Yeah.
don't do that.
Get it. Right. Okay, so we have covered a bit of it here, but what are the most suitable avocado rootstocks for arid and semi-arid regions?
Well, if the soil
Yeah.
usually in those areas is with high alkaline, with high lime content,
Yep.
and maybe salinity problems, first of all, use West Indian rootstock.
Yeah.
You can adjust every rootstock to the specific conditions because every variety inside the Western Indian rootstock, we have a number of varieties, adjust to very specific conditions. Okay. So what we usually do is we ask the grower to run a full soil analysis, water analysis. Remember, we talked about the water source, and then we adjust the proper rootstock for every condition. There are cases that we hesitate, maybe this one or the other one, so we try both, or 3 or 4, but no more than that. And of course, every variety has the specific characteristics for every soil and water and conditions. But those are the varieties I would recommend.
Okay. And what's the most suitable avocado rootstocks for rainy season? Because we have some areas where we have heavy monsoon in India.
I understand. I was in India with the monsoon. I know it's heavy rain.
Yeah.
But heavy rain results in flood and all that. So if the soil orchard becomes flood for a lot of time, for a long period of time, the trees will be affected. No question about it. The strongest rootstock that can withstand that condition is fir tree. No question about it. But even fir tree, if this situation continues, if you see water on the soil for a long time, even fir tree will not survive. If you have good aeration and water percolates properly, there will not be of consequence.
So if we build raised beds, or you call them what do you call it? Ridges or raised beds, then does that help?
If you have clay soil, you should build high beds and build them in a way that water will drain out of the field. So if you know that you are in an area of danger, let's call it, you should build the rows in a way, first of all, high beds, and second, so water use natural slope or whatever to get rid of the water. That's critical because avocado roots is very sensitive to excess of water or lack of oxygen.
Now, what's the difference between F1 and F2 rootstocks?
That's a good question.
Yeah.
Thank you for the question. because that's a very important issue, and many people do not understand the difference. And the difference is very significant. And we're talking about genetics. Every variety, and I'm general, has Fairchild, Degania, doesn't matter if it's a rootstock, every variety of every crop has certain genetic conditions that were conferred with the selection program, blah, 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 etc. This characteristic, when you propagate, if you want to, the first generation after propagation is what we call F1, that has the original genetic conditions. If you have a mother orchard and you pick the seeds have all the genetic inheritance that belongs to the variety. If you put it in the plant, it grows the tree that has all these conditions. But the tree that grows from this seed, if you take its seeds and put it again in the field, it is F2. F2 means it's contaminated. Because there are other trees around that can be from a different variety, and by pollination, cross-pollination, you get some characteristics will remain, but not 100%. So F2 lost some of the original characteristics. So if you say you're very satisfied with a variety and you want to repeat it, it's the taking seeds from this will result in F2, and it will not be the same. You have to go to the source again and use the original seeds. And that's what people do not understand. Because if I take fertile sites from the originals, is F1. But if I plant the seed in a commercial orchard with different varieties, and there are some other orchards in the vicinity, you cannot prevent cross-pollination. So the seeds that you take from these trees lost some of the original characteristics. And if you call it, you can call it fertile, but it's not the same fertile as the original one.
But then I had a question. Let's say there's a Fairchild rootstock orchard, and you still need a type B to cross-pollinate Fairchild.
No, you don't need that, because these trees can pollinate themselves. For a Fairchild tree, what you say, it's in commercial field for commercial varieties. For example, here in Israel, we use Ettinger to pollinate Hass. It's not that Hass alone will not yield in commercial yield, but this will increase your yield. But this is a commercial. This has nothing to do with F1 and F2. F1 and F2 is preserving the original characteristics. And for that, every time you plant, you need to go back to the source. Of course, the source has to be identified, has to meet some very strong characteristics, like, for example, here in Israel, the requirements are that 20 kilometers radius in all directions cannot be another avocado orchard.
All right.
To prevent cross-pollination. Is to make sure that your certificate is F1. So the characteristic, if you're talking about fertile, is the original fertile and not
some mix.
Contaminated fertile.
So the genetic material remains pure.
It remains the same. So because if I tell you fertile has this tolerance for salinity, for chloride, for lime, but if that means F1. The moment you are in F2, actually you don't know. how it will react. The problem is that growers that are not aware of this particular difference between F1 and F2, they think they are growing Fairchild, and it's not the original Fairchild, and some of the original characteristics were lost. And then they say, of course, they would say, but I put Fairchild, and whatever you told me that it's tolerant to this and this, and it's not happening. The reason is very simple. It's not the original. Yeah. And when you plant it, actually, you don't know what you get.
It's very important then, because this was, I didn't, this point for me was unclear previously, but now it's much more clear.
I hope I explained it clearly.
Yeah, you explained it very well.
In a way that it should be understood by people that has not scientific background.
Yeah. Now, I want to talk about clonal versus seedling rootstocks, and which is better and why.
Well, the original idea of the clonal propagation was to create what Professor Benyacov said, copy trees. You take an original tree and you can copy it. The original idea was that if you can copy it, it will be the same. Every tree is a copy of the original, and therefore, if this is an outstanding tree in your field, you will be able, because you know that in commercial fields, you have 1 hectare of avocado, but not every tree yields the same. Some trees more, some trees less, some trees bigger fruits, some smaller fruits. Every tree is individual. The idea was to create copy trees by clonal propagation. Unfortunately, until today, there was no success. It doesn't happen in the field. So the idea is excellent. The problem is that until today, and I'm very careful because you never know what will happen, but till today, the moment we're talking, we don't get, because you should, when you are clonal propagation, what you expect? Uniformity. All trees are the same. Yes. It doesn't happen.
How come?
And not that. The yields become lower as compared with the original propagation with seedlings. So this requires further research, and I wouldn't recommend it at commercial level for a grower to go for that. It's in the level of semi-commercial and, of course, research. It requires more research. The idea looks excellent. The problem is it doesn't work until today.
So you're saying like, so if they've clonally propagated the rootstock, crafted the clonally propagated scion, it would still not give a copy tree.
We don't get that. That's the thing.
On the field, you don't get it.
Doesn't happen on the field. It happens in nursery. The moment the trees, the seedlings are ready to be transplanted into the commercial orchard. Over the years, you don't get all the advantages that you expect from this kind of propagation, because what you expect is a very uniform orchard, high yielding, etc. Doesn't happen.
Right, because I was under the impression that like somehow clonal was better because it's new.
No,
that was the impression I had in my mind.
No. It has nothing to do with new, because a new seedling, it's not even a new technique. The technique exists since the 60s or the 70s. Benyacov thought of that in the 70s. He already talked about making copy trees. The problem is the idea, it's perfect.
Yeah.
The problem is to put it in practice. It does not work over the years, because you cannot judge you cannot assess this technique in a couple of years. You need at least 10 years of yield to assess it. And in our experience, and we have a lot of experience in this particular technique, it doesn't work until today. I'm not saying it will never work. And I'm not saying stop the research, it's a stupid idea. It's an excellent idea, but until now, it doesn't work. You don't get what you expect. And this is the problem with, and this is the reason why, if you take avocado trees all over the world, a very small percentage has been propagated with this technique. And the reason is because it's still not commercial.
Right. Okay.
The researchers are still working on this technique. It doesn't work until today.
Glad that I could get it clear in my head.
No, the idea is excellent.
Yeah.
The idea is excellent. I agree with that.
Now, what's your opinion on Velvic and Zutano? Velvic is used in Australia and Zutano is used in New Zealand. Like, have you used it? Have you seen
No,
the results?
I have a lot of experience, mostly with Zutano.
Okay.
Both varieties were tried here in Israel. They do not exist anymore. So you understand what happened here in Israel. You will not find trees grafted on these varieties. Zutano is very popular in Latin America, especially in Peru, has become very popular. Colombia as well, but less. The problem with, first of all, Zutano belongs to the Mexican race. So, having said that, it falls into the category of sensitivity to soil conditions, to water, salinity, lime, blah, blah, blah. In arid areas, I can only tell you my experience mostly in Peru, because they have most of the avocado trees in Peru are grown in very arid areas with a 0 millimeter of rainfall, zero, literally zero. It's even not like in Israel, because here we have Mediterranean climate, we have some rainfall during the winter.
Yes.
They don't have that, even, nothing. And Zutano became very popular. It's probably one of the best varieties that belongs to the Mexican race. And lately it has been replaced, and it's clear to the growers that the Zutano time, it doesn't work in arid areas. It's too sensitive to lime, salinity, and these are problems in arid areas. And Western India varieties are by far much better. So they are being replaced. Gradually, this variety will disappear in arid areas. And semi-arid areas, like here in Israel, Zutano has already disappeared. Does not exist anymore. The other variety, I have less experience, but we have run a few trials here, and it was clear that Western Indian varieties are better, so we just discarded it. We didn't keep trying it.
Right. So let's discuss about the king of avocado varieties, Hass. Right. What are the climatic requirements for Hass avocado, and what difference does sea elevation makes on the fruit or the fruit set or the tree?
Well, Hass, in terms of climatic requirements, it does not like, let's say, Avocado does not like, does not like extreme temperatures.
Yes, yes.
So we're talking not cool and not very hot. So if you're talking, like we discussed earlier, 40, 42 degrees, wouldn't like that. And even, let's say, temperatures 2-3 degrees,
Yeah.
it's not for Haas.
Right.
And I'm talking the original Haas.
Yes.
I'm not talking the new clones like La Vie and others that we discussed earlier. So Haas is very, very specific in terms of climatic requirements. In terms of pollination and that, in Peru, they have tried Sutano as a pollinator for Haas. And they report that they get good results. Here we use Ettinger.
Yes. I'm also using Ettinger.
And in the farms I know in Peru that they have tried Ettinger, they left Sutano and went to Ettinger.
Okay.
With regards to the new varieties, it's still too early to talk about that.
Now, I want to know about, like, I've been told that Haas grows well above 1,000 meters or 1,500 meters. What difference does that make?
It's a very important difference. But I tell you, depends on the local climate. Because when you're talking about 1,000, 2,000 meters, depends the microclimate. If it's a valley protected, you can go in Colombia. I've seen avocado excellent orchards at 2,500 meters. And they are great, but they are protected. It's a valley protected. And so I think it's dangerous to say avocado grows better or Haas grows better 1,000 or 2,000 or whatever. I would consider the local condition very specific. I would test and see and make sure that the climatic conditions are met. It can be that in this area it can be perfect and the area nearby, no. Total no. And it's the same height. So it's dangerous to make such a general remark. It's too dangerous. I wouldn't do that.
Okay. And what should be the planting space?
Oh, that's a question. First of all, no, it's a good question. It depends on a number of factors. It depends mostly on the rootstock. If it's vigor. If it's very vigorous, you need a higher spacing. If it's not, and there are some of the characteristics that the rootstock confers to the scion is vigor. For example, Fairchild is a very vigorous variety. Okay. And on the other hand, Tsiffrin, it's not. So you have to play with the rootstock. The other factor that affects is what kind of machinery you use in the field. For example, I've seen a number of orchards in Peru that they plant 7 by 3. Why? Because they want high density, but they want to go into the row with the tractor for spraying, etc. And the tractor's width is 7 meters. So they say, we plant 7 meters because we want to go inside with the tractor. Here, of course, it changed with the rootstock, but we use 6 by 4, 6 by 3, more or less. That would be the right spacing.
Okay. So my next question is, can we intercrop and grow something in between the rows? Because farmers here don't want to wait for 3 years after they have planted the trees to get something out of the orchard. So, what are your suggestions regarding that?
That's a problem.
That's a problem.
First of all, in Israel, we don't do that.
Yes, I've seen that.
I know you have seen. We don't do that.
Okay.
In other countries, it's a common practice for the same reason that you mentioned. The problem with that is that the irrigation and the nutrition requirements are different. If you intercrop, you're adding a crop that has totally different. So if you work, you just dismiss it. You don't consider the other crop. You work like what avocado. For avocado, the other crop will not be a success.
But
if you work for like forever, you put in the middle,
yeah,
the avocado will suffer. So,
like my question is, I'm not talking about firstly permanent crops. I'm talking about vegetables that are like you grow for first 3 years and then you take it out. And I'm talking about for the space in between the rows where the tractor
yes,
can go.
I understood perfectly, and that's exactly what I meant.
Okay.
Vegetables grow at they have a different growth rate than avocado. They have totally different requirements. I'm not talking about tomatoes and not about whatever. I'm talking generally, have totally different water and nutrient requirements than avocado. So if you grow avocado, grow avocado. If you grow vegetables, grow vegetables. Both, it's not this and not this. So that's the reason why nobody does it in Israel. And there is a reason for that. It's not a cultural thing and not a religious thing. It just doesn't work. So because you will damage, it's a compromise. And don't compromise. Do your best.
And what kind of irrigation system do you suggest? Because I spoke to NetFM earlier, and they suggested, like people from NetFM Israel actually, and they suggested to use Uniram. It's an inline dripper, and
I know what Uniram is.
Yeah, so they suggested
I
that
remind
one.
you that I'm also an irrigation expert. I know what Uniram is. I know it very well since the first time they tried it. NetFM tried, I was involved in those trials.
Yeah.
Uniram is a specific trademark for NetFM.
Yes.
It's drip irrigation. It's what we call the compensated drip irrigation. And I would use it only in the case where it's needed. First of all, there's not every case for using compensated drip irrigation. It's more expensive. There's another something in the field that can happen in anything. First decision is whether you're going to irrigate by drip irrigation or by micro sprinklers. I wouldn't suggest sprinklers.
You would not?
No.
Okay.
Sprinklers, no. Micro sprinklers or drip irrigation. Second question, you decided compensated, not compensated. That will depend, that will be different every project. Uniram, it's NetFM. There are other companies. I have nothing against NetFM. I work with them successfully for many years. I have very good friends there, but consider there are other companies. One of them is an Indian company, Nan Jain.
Yeah.
It's today an Indian company. I know Nan. Yes. I used to live near Nan. I know Nan, the kibbutz. For many, many years, Nan is a kibbutz.
Yeah. Okay.
And Jain, I forgot to tell you at the beginning that one of my visits to India was with Jain. For irrigation training of some agronomists of the Jain company, which, as you know, it's a huge company in India. Today, Nan is together with Jain.
Yes.
But I'm not recommending a specific company.
Okay.
I'm talking the base. I'm going back. First, decide what kind of irrigation system do you want. And that will be affected by the soil, the climate, blah, blah, blah.
Yeah.
All the factors, it's a lecture to discuss that. I'm
So
not going to do that.
Just one thing though. So what? Let's talk about micro sprinklers and drip irrigation. So which one is better? Just between those two.
There's not the answer to this question is not which one is better. Which one is better for these conditions of the project we're discussing?
Yeah. Okay.
Depends on the climate, the soil, etc. So there is not a clear-cut answer to this question. Drip is better. Both have advantages and limitations, like everything. So for every case, you decide what is the proper irrigation system. There's not a clear-cut answer to this question.
I've heard that micro sprinklers require more maintenance because it tends to fall down like this.
That's a limitation. True. Yeah. Micro sprinklers require the basic. It's totally vertical. It has to be vertical for uniform water distribution. That's correct. So that's one factor. But there are many factors. That's a limitation. I can tell you that has some advantages over drip irrigation. For example, you can change the microclimate with the micro sprinklers. With drippers, the drippers have no effect on the microclimate whatsoever. Nothing, zero.
All right, okay.
That's to put in the proportion. Yeah. So that's what I'm saying. I could continue.
Let's talk about it some other time.
It's not for today. Yeah. What I mean to say is that every case is different. So you have, in every case, think what is best.
Thank you so much for your time. I have many more questions, so I'm sure we can schedule another time. And I'd like to.
I'll be happy to.
Yeah, so my audience would be happy to hear from you.
Thank you. My pleasure.
Thank you so much. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
All right.